Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lynn Berger, host of Lynn Berger Interviews Remarkable People. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Eric Drath. Eric is a filmmaker who specializes in sports documentaries and is a fabulous storyteller. He's an Emmy-Award winner who entertains us, yet touches us emotionally through his work. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lynn. It's nice to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So take us back to your earlier years. Did you know what you wanted to do?
Not really. I mean, I had no intention of becoming a filmmaker. That was just not a word or a career that I ever thought would be fitting for me. I remember as a young kid, being very into news and reporting, but never filmmaking. But you know, as I went through life, sports kind of took over, and I put this idea of, you know, journalism, you know, away. And I was like, you know, like most, you know, kids growing up, just loved sports and loved being outside.
Okay. All right. So when did this all start, though? Lead us through. Where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in New York City.
Yes.
Originally on the Upper West Side.
Mm-hmm.
I went to public school, PS 166, which is on 89th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the 70s
Mm-hmm.
when the Upper West Side was a much different place. In fact, muggings were pretty common. And I used to live right off Broadway, and the school on 89th, and the school was on 89th between Amsterdam and Columbus. And I remember having to wait halfway down the block for the light to change and then run across Amsterdam. Wow. Because it was scary. We got picked on and we got mugged a lot.
But you survived.
I survived, yeah, and it was great. You know, it was New York City in the 70s was a different place, but it was a really great place. I mean, you know, I didn't notice race or, you know, any differences amongst the kids I went to school with. It was a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like it was.
Yeah.
And very meaningful as well as you
Yeah.
describe it. So what happens after you left school in the city?
So I went through school. I was never a very good student. I really liked, you know, again, sports and running around, and I was, you know, I used to rollerblade or roller skate originally, and I'd roller skate into the evening and then come home for dinner. But I was just out. We were out in the streets playing all the time. And when I got to 8th grade, you know, I was just not doing well in school. And you know, and I think my parents were a little concerned with some of the kids I was hanging out with, you know, playing basketball and whatnot. And, you know, somebody suggested, you know, boarding school. And I thought that might be a good idea. I was, you know, I had a lot of difficulties. You know, my parents got divorced. And that was kind of tough, even though I didn't think of it at the time. At the time, I thought, oh, whatever. But, you know, I was going through a lot of changes, and I went to boarding school when I was 14, upstate New York, and I was into a world I never knew.
What a contrast.
Complete contrast, yeah. It was you know, it was a New England boarding school, and you know, coming from New York City, it was a cultural shock. But they had what I really liked, and that was sports. And they had, you know, football, which I played, and I played baseball, and I even got to play hockey. I'd played roller hockey, but they had ice hockey there. So.
Oh, it sounds like that part was fun.
Yeah, yeah. Although there, I continued to struggle with school, and I got into a lot of trouble. And I got into so much trouble that my senior year, I was asked to leave the school after, you know, my third disciplinary meeting, and I was kicked out. And I got back to New York City, and I thought my life was over. You know, I was really down, and but I got into a school on the Upper West Side, and I used to, and called Anglo-American at the time. Mm-hmm. I went to Anglo-American and finished my senior year there, and wound up playing 3 sports in 2 seasons, which was fun, and yeah.
Okay, and then what happens after that?
And then after that, after that, I actually went to the University of Arizona, which is as far away as I could get. And I thought that it was, amazing. Like, again, being like a New York City kid and all of a sudden seeing these like palm trees and, it was just a different world in the desert. I didn't know it got cold in the desert, but it got cold in the desert.
Learned something.
Yeah. And, I got into trouble again. I made the lacrosse team, and everything was going great. And I came back from a tournament in California, and we're all sitting on the grass and talking about the game, and a police car pulls up, and I was like, "Oh, what's that about?" And they said, "Eric, come here." And so I walked over, and they took my equipment and they put it in the back of the trooper car, and I had given this kid that I thought was, a friendly thing to do. I'd given him some illegal substance, and I didn't sell it. I gave it, and he took off all his clothes, and he ran around campus naked, and he couldn't remember his name, but he could remember mine, and lo and behold, I got into a lot of trouble.
Then
Things got worse before they got better.
Well, before they got better.
Right.
Okay.
So I spent a night in jail there, and then I got home. And when I got home, all my friends were in colleges, so I was really like, what am I going to do with my life? And I wound up enrolling in NYU. Not enrolling, matriculating, just taking classes. And I was really motivated, and I wound up getting really good grades. And I started to make some changes in my life that around drugs and alcohol, because that was the crux of the problems all along the way. And I met someone at one of these meetings that I was going to, who happened to be at Columbia University in the admissions department. And he said, "Why don't you apply?" And I said, "I'll never get in there." He goes, "You never know." And I applied, and I got in. And thank God for Columbia University, because it changed my life. And I went and got into a fraternity. I played lacrosse there, made a whole new set of friends. I studied my butt off. I started studying political science, and one night I was going to a lacrosse meeting, and I walked into the radio station, a studio kind of like this, and I was enamored. I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then I got a radio show. 3 weeks later, I was like, how do I do this? And I got my FCC. Back then you needed a Class 3 FCC license, just in case, the emergency broadcasting system, in case something happened. It was during the Persian Gulf War. And then I applied and got a job at ABC News as an intern. And I started working in the news. I was working on the radio. I was at college. And my life started to go in a different direction.
What a twist.
Yes, yes, indeed. And
well, you made it happen. It's
a lot of things were presented. I do have deep faith in God, and I believe that God's given me these opportunities. If you show up, He'll deliver, and that's been my experience. And I like to always say, one of my favorite quotes is how dark it gets before the dawn, and it's so true. When things look the darkest, you just got to keep moving forward. And there's been many dark times, and there will be more dark times in my life. Sometimes not at the same magnitude, right? But they happen. I knew that I wanted to get into journalism. I worked at a smaller PR-related TV company called DWJ, and then applied and got a job at CNN. CNN was great. It was like getting into college. You had to take a test to get an interview. And then once you were there, they started you at the bottom in a position called a video journalist. I don't know if they still have it. I had to move to Atlanta. They paid $17,000. I didn't care. As long as I could, get a buttered roll and I could show up for work, I was fine. And I started working there, and I took newsmaker tests. And there's a lot out there about education and whatnot. CNN at the time was a complete meritocracy. They didn't care your background. They didn't care anything. If you could if you worked hard and took the test,
That's
you get it.
fantastic.
And I remember one of the benefits of being a VJ, because it certainly wasn't monetary money, was that you got to meet the president of the news organization, John Johnson, who was this legend in news. And I sat there, and he goes, "Oh, where'd you go to school? What'd you study?" And I said, "Well, I went to Columbia, but I studied political science. I know I should have studied journalism." He goes, "We don't want people that study journalism or TV. We want people that are, energetic, smart, and want to work hard, because we can teach TV to people." And that, when he said that, that is how I still hire people today, because now I have employees, I have a company. We'll get there in a minute. But that's my philosophy. Like, it's great if you have experience, but I want to know that you're hungry, that you're interested, that you're curious, that you're ready to work hard. Because the TV, you can learn. So I worked there, and then I was getting kind of homesick. It had been about 2 years, and somebody said, "Oh, they're starting this new network in New York, Fox, this, that." I was like, I didn't care. I just wanted to get back to New York. So it was the Fox News Channel. And I was one of the first producers at the Fox News Channel. And I got to tell you, whatever your thoughts are and whatever the audience's thoughts are on Fox, when we started it, it was a great place. It was you report, we report, you decide, fair and balanced. It was really like, go out there and tell both sides of the story. I was never told, go out there and tell the conservative side or the liberal side. It was go out there and report, and it was great. And I had a great mentor named John Moody, who was just one of the smartest guys, fair, just brilliant man. And he was probably more conservative than most, but it didn't bleed over into what I did as a field producer. And they'd send me here and there, and I'd be in a satellite truck uplinking with a reporter out there doing hits all around the country. It was great. I covered so many different things, got to interview, you name it, like people like Henry Kissinger, and I even got to ask Princess Diana some questions. So it wasn't a one-on-one interview, but I got a couple questions in at an event, but I was just covering everything, and I loved it, and I loved it so much. And then a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go to a boxing show, and I was like, boxing?
Did you ever go to boxing before that?
Never. I never liked boxing. I liked it. Tyson. I'd watch Tyson, but I wasn't like a true boxing fan. But I went to this boxing match. It was in Yonkers Raceway in the field house, and I was just floored. They had turned this little field house where they usually auction off horses. They built bleachers, and there weren't bleachers, there were tables, but there was, women in the hoochie mama, kind of outfits, and guys that looked like wise guys smoking cigars, and, it was just like,
wild.
It was wild. And again, coming from New York City and then being in this preppy school, and then in Arizona, it was like another like crazy environment. And I was hooked. I was like, I want to know how this works. I want to be involved. So I started asking my bosses at Fox if I could cover more boxing stuff, and I did, and I started meeting people, and I met, there was a local promoter, and I'm going to give him a plug, Joe DeGuardia, one of the great angels in my life, and he's up in the Bronx. And he has Star Boxing, and he's done a great job with a lot of fighters. And I said, hey, can I work for you? And he goes, well, what's your background? I said, journalism. He goes, oh, why don't you be the publicist? Little did I know that being the publicist meant, driving a van, picking fighters up from the airport, taking them to a motel, then having them piss in a cup to bring it to the doctors for testing. It was, working in the locker rooms, and then once in a while, like, oh yeah, you want to write something and call the press? So it was everything, but it was my indoctrination into boxing. I loved it. And, my parents thought I was crazy to leave this, network job, at Fox. But I had done what I wanted to do at Fox. As a journalist, like I didn't, I knew I was never going to be on air. And I wanted to get into something different. And I wound up actually working in boxing and signing some guys, first women, to represent. So I represented female fighters. I had great fighters like Jill the Zion Lion Matthews, who lived on the Upper West Side. I had Bridget Blackout Robinson, and she was a heavy. She was a heavyweight, and the way we got her name was because she worked at Con Ed in the day. So Blackout, it's great, and it was fun. It was out of this world, and anyway, a lot of funny stories, and then I wound up meeting some promoters from Poland and Germany and Hungary, and I would bring fighters from the U.S. over to them for fights, and they never won. There's the sport is completely lopsided. There's an A side and a B side, and the B side never wins. And so I was traveling all over the world doing this, and while I was in a gym, I heard I met this guy named Louis Resto. And Louis Resto was this fighter who was training, a former fighter who was training guys and kids. And everybody was like, oh, that's Louis Resto. He was put in jail. He was banned from the sport of boxing. Did you know what happened to him? I was like, no, this guy, he's so nice. And most boxers, almost every boxer I've met is the sweetest guy.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and so I said to him, I was like, what happened? He goes, oh no, this bad thing happened, but I'm innocent. I was like, oh really? And I said, well, I got to tell the story because my journalistic instincts kicked in.
Right.
And I went to my friend Barry Murphy, great Barry Murphy, another plug. And I said, let's make this movie. He said, let's do it. And we didn't know what we were doing. And we scraped together about $25,000, and we just went out and shot. And it wasn't $25,000 at once. It was by the time we were done. And we made this movie about Billy Resto and Billy Collins. Jr. And it's a tragedy. It's a very, very sad story what happened. Okay, so we make this rough cut. We tell this story. We uncover new information. And we get the rough cut, which was a DVD at the time, to a buddy of mine, Fred Cambria, who was actually part of the making of the film too. And he got it. He was coaching girls lacrosse up in Westchester. And one of the girls on the team's father was the executive producer of HBO Sports. So he gave him the rough cut, and the guy watched it, and he said, this is great.
That was lucky.
He didn't say this is great. He said this is very good, but we can make it great. So he went, and HBO bought it. We did what, they helped me make it even better than it was. And lo and behold, that year, we won the Emmy for Best Sports Documentary.
What a story. You find people that appear. I see
that. Yes, there are angels in my life.
I see that.
Yes. And then when I was there, the publicist from HBO Sports said, oh, well, what's your next project? I'm like, next project? He goes, well, you better come up with one because that's the first thing everyone's going to ask. And I was like, okay. And then I remembered a story when I was young in 1970s. It was 1977. I was in the living room. My sister had a doctor named Dr. Richard Raskin, who had worked on her eyes. And then on the TV, I remember, and it was the U.S. Open. It must have been around this time.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming out to the grandstand, center court, Reneé Richards. I was like, what? And my parents were like, pss, pss. So listen for the whispers. When people are whispering, listen up. And I was like, oh, that's a great story. So I called Reneé Richards, the transsexual doctor.
Yes.
Who's now a doctor who was practicing ophthalmology, 10 blocks from my office. Happened to be, and I wound up convincing her to let me do her story, and I did the next movie, Reneé, for ESPN.
Yeah.
So I made Reneé, and then started working with ESPN a lot. I wound up doing a lot of work with ESPN. Then and through my career, I started my company, Live Star Entertainment, back around 2001. And, we've been pretty busy ever since. We do a lot of different things where, we do live events. We've started doing the live production. So we do live sports and concerts. We do award shows. We do corporate events and corporate videos. And we do these documentaries.
Well, this is quite a story, I have to say. And I'd love it if we could step back a little bit, because people are going to be watching this that are going to be looking for some advice, some, quote, life lessons, and I think there's so many here. So would you share a little bit about what I listened to a commencement speech you made at your boarding school, and there was so much there, a few nuggets there. So if you were going to step back and share a couple of those, what would you tell a younger person or even someone making a career change to think about as they're going through the challenges they're facing?
Well, I know it's an old saying, like, if you work in a career, you're never going to feel like you work at a job. There's the jobs and there's a career. Find something that you know and that you think you're passionate about, and go there, and let that be your guide. Common sense is like, get a job. The conventional way of thinking about things, will give you a conventional life.
Right.
But to really, really like look around you and find what you're interested in. Sometimes I suggest to people, like, they're like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm like, all right, well, when you get the newspaper,
exactly,
what section do you look at first?
Exactly. I've been saying that for 20 years.
Maybe I heard it from you then.
That's it, right?
Yeah. So, start there and then narrow it down. And and that really is something that people can look for. And then I also think, like, when you start your career, it's sometimes better to start at a big place and then kind of, work your way out, because you get a network. Not all the time. Like the team that works for me, it's a great opportunity because they get to do everything right away. And the way my philosophy at my company is, like, I first ask, what are you interested in? Are you interested in editing? Are you interested in writing? What do you want to do? What kind of movies do you like? And then I want them to work on things like that to really, because I know they're going to be more interested in more, and they're going to put a lot more time and effort into it.
Okay. No, that's great. And I love how you hire people. More people need to take that into account when they're hiring people. You want someone that really wants it, and all the other stuff can be learned. So thank you for all that. Now, let's get to what you're doing now. What are you focused in on? What are your next projects?
Well, we'll be releasing The Dream Whisperer on PBS in the beginning of 2024.
Right.
And that's a tremendous story about legendary New York Knick, Dick Barnett. And Dick is just an incredible example of someone who says, never give up on your dreams. He played at Tennessee A&I, which is now TSU, Tennessee State University, which is HBCU. And he was on a team that won 3 championships in a row during integrated play. So 1957, 58, 59. And so they won these championships, and right after they got back from winning, they went right to the picket lines and the civil rights era during Nashville. They were under unbelievable duress, and it was just injustices, and they never got to celebrate, and they never got the attention of the Hall of Fame, and they were overlooked. And all these years later, I followed Dick Barnett for 10 years. It took me to make this film. I follow him as he tries to get his team inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame.
Wow, 10 years?
10 years.
Yeah, how do you come up with your subjects?
One of two different ways. Either I, am just passionate about a project and just, drill down and do whatever I can and pitch it to a network, or sometimes someone will come to me with an idea, and sometimes although it hasn't been in a while, a network will come to me and tell me to do it. I like to tell stories about like human nature, just kind of like boxing was. Like I wasn't so interested in the boxing, but the stories of boxing I was interested in. You know, same thing with like Reneé Richards. I really got fascinated by her son and that relationship, and you know his inability to really accept his father's transformation into a woman. And you know, not enough is talked about, you know, in this world of transgender and this and that, the implications for the family.
Absolutely.
And that was something that really, really, I identified with Nicky. He grew up in New York City, you know, and I understood, you know, and I could understand his inability to accept it. But on the same token, Reneé Richards is one of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. I love her dearly, and I am so fortunate to have met her and made her film. So, you know, when you make these films, you know, you kind of fall in love with the subjects, even when they have like, you know, warts and everything. You kind of understand.
Well, you get really into the character and their lives and their motivations and their challenges.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, it was great to meet you.
Likewise.
What a story.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you spending time with me this afternoon. And would you like to share any contact information with anyone?
Well, I mean, you know, you can certainly go to our website if you're looking for a production company, livestarentertainment.com or lsetv.com. And yeah, check out the films, and I hope you like them because, you know, we try to tell stories that, you know, that resonate, you know, with a greater audience. So.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.